Clock ticked, classroom silent. Beloved teacher bled to death. Sarah, a 17-year-old honor student, stood frozen, clutching a bloody letter opener. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she stared at the lifeless body. She deserved it, Sarah muttered, her voice trembling. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped her back to reality. Panic set in. She had to think fast. How could she explain this? How could she get away with it? The door creaked open. Officer Hendricks arrived at the scene, his heart pounding. The call had been urgent. A teacher found dead in her classroom. As he stepped inside, the metallic smell of blood hit him. Sarah sat in the corner, her hands stained red, her face pale. I found her like this, she stammered. Hendricks narrowed his eyes. Something wasn't adding up. The letter opener on the floor, the blood on Sarah's handset was too convenient. He radioed for backup. This wasn't just a tragic accident. This was murder, and Sarah was his prime suspect. The interrogation room was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sarah sat across from Detective Martinez, her hands cuffed. "Tell me what happened, Sarah," Martinez said, his tone calm but firm. Sarah's eyes darted around the room. "I didn't do it. I swear. I found her like that." Martinez leaned in closer. "Then why were your fingerprints on the weapon?" Sarah's breath hitched. She hadn't thought about that. Her mind raced. She needed a story, and fast. But Martinez wasn't buying it. He knew she was hiding something, and he was determined to find out what. Sarah's heart pounded as she tried to piece together her alibi. "I was in the library," she said, her voice shaky. "I left my phone there. You can check the cameras." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "We did. You weren't there." Sarah's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected them to check so quickly. I must have been in the bathroom," she stammered. Martinez leaned back, crossing his arms. "Sarah, we have evidence placing you in the classroom at the time of the murder. You need to start telling the truth." Sarah's mind raced. How could she talk her way out of this? The evidence was damning. Sarah's fingerprints were on the letter opener, and security footage showed her entering the classroom just minutes before the murder. Martinez laid it all out on the table. "You were there, Sarah. You had the weapon. You had the motive." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to. She was failing me. I couldn't let her ruin my future." Martinez sighed. "So you killed her?" Sarah nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think it would go this far." Martinez leaned in. "It's time to face the consequences, Sarah." Sarah's confession echoed through the interrogation room. "I just wanted her to stop failing me," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to kill her." Martinez listened intently, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you just talk to her, Sarah? Why resort to violence?" Sarah shook her head. "I tried. She wouldn't listen. She didn't care about me." Martinez sighed. "And now you've thrown your life away." Sarah buried her face in her hands. "I thought I could get away with it. I thought no one would suspect me." Martinez stood up. "You were wrong, Sarah. Dead wrong." News of Sarah's arrest spread like wildfire through the school. Students and teachers alike were in shock. How could a straight A student commit such a heinous act? Sarah's friends were devastated, struggling to reconcile the girl they knew with the cold-blooded killer she had become. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in her cell, the weight of her actions crushing her. She had thought she could outsmart everyone, but now she was facing a lifetime behind bars. The reality of her situation was sinking in, and there was no escape. The courtroom was packed as Sarah's trial began. The prosecution laid out the evidence: the fingerprints, the security footage, Sarah's confession. The defense argued that Sarah had acted in a moment of desperation, but the jury wasn't convinced. As the verdict was read, Sarah's heart sank. Guilty. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison, her first chance at parole decades away. As she was led out of the courtroom, Sarah realized the full extent of what she had done. She had thrown away her future, all because she thought she could get away with murder. Prison life was a harsh reality for Sarah. Gone were the days of studying and dreaming of college. Now, she was just another inmate, serving time for a crime she couldn't take back. The other prisoners eyed her with suspicion, and Sarah struggled to find her place. She spent her days in silence, haunted by the memory of what she had done. The weight of her guilt was unbearable, and she knew there was no escape. She had thought she could outsmart everyone, but now she was paying the price. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's regret grew. She replayed the events of that fateful day, over and over in her mind, wishing she could go back and change things. She thought about Miss Thompson, about the life she had taken and the pain she had caused. She thought about her own future, now shattered beyond repair. Sarah had thought she could get away with it, but now she realized the truth. There was no escaping the consequences of her actions. She had destroyed her life, and there was no going back. Sarah's family was devastated. Her parents struggled to understand how their daughter could have done something so terrible. They visited her in prison, but the visits were strained, filled with tears and unanswered questions. Sarah's younger sister, Emily, was especially affected. She had looked up to Sarah, but now she was left to grapple with the reality of what her sister had done. The family's pain was palpable, a constant reminder of the lives that had been shattered by Sarah's actions. The school was in mourning. Ms. Thompson had been a beloved teacher, and her death left a void that couldn't be filled. Students and teachers alike struggled to come to terms with what had happened. Counseling services were offered, but the pain lingered. Sarah's classmates were especially shaken, struggling to reconcile the girl they had known with the killer she had become. The school would never be the same, and the memory of that day would haunt them for years to come. The media descended on the story like vultures. Sarah's face was plastered across newspapers and TV screens, her story sensationalized for the world to see. Reporters dug into her past, searching for any clue that could explain her actions. Sarah's family was hounded by the press, their lives turned upside down. The media frenzy only added to the pain, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. Sarah watched it all from her cell, powerless to stop the storm she had unleashed. Sarah underwent a psychological evaluation, the results of which were chilling. The psychologist concluded that Sarah had acted out of a combination of desperation and a warped sense of justice. She had felt cornered, unable to see any other way out. But that didn't excuse her actions. The evaluation painted a picture of a deeply troubled young woman, one who had been pushed to the brink. But it also made it clear Sarah knew what she was doing. She had made a choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. Miss Thompson's legacy lived on. A scholarship was established in her name, aimed at helping students who struggled academically. Her colleagues remembered her as a dedicated teacher who had always gone above and beyond for her students. But her death left a lasting impact, a reminder of the dangers that could lurk in even the most seemingly safe environments. Ms. Thompson's memory was honored, but the pain of her loss would never fully fade. Years passed, and Sarah's first parole hearing approached. She sat before the board, her hands trembling. "I've changed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I regret what I did every single day." The board listened, their expressions unreadable. But the decision was clear. Sarah's actions had been too heinous, the consequences too severe. Parole was denied. Sarah was led back to her cell, the weight of her past still heavy on her shoulders. She had thought she could get away with it, but now she knew. There was no escape. As the years went by, Sarah had plenty of time to reflect. She thought about the choices she had made, the life she had thrown away. She thought about Miss Thompson, about the pain she had caused, and she thought about herself, about the person she had become. Sarah had thought she could outsmart everyone, but now she realized the truth. She had only outsmarted herself. She had destroyed her life, and there was no going back. Sarah began to seek redemption in small ways. She participated in prison programs, trying to make amends for her actions. She wrote letters to Miss Thompson's family, expressing her remorse. But the road to redemption was long, and Sarah knew she would never fully atone for what she had done. Still, she tried. It was all she could do. As Sarah's sentence neared its end, she found herself grappling with a mix of emotions. She was older now, wiser, but the weight of her past still haunted her. She thought about the life she could have had, the future she had thrown away, but she also thought about the lessons she had learned, the person she had become. Sarah had thought she could get away with it, but now she knew there was no escaping the consequences of her actions. The day finally came. Sarah was released from prison. She stepped out into the world, a free woman, but the weight of her past still hung heavy on her shoulders. She had served her time, but she knew she would never truly be free. The memory of what she had done would follow her for the rest of her life. Sarah had thought she could get away with it, but now she knew there was no escape. Sarah tried to start anew, but the past was never far behind. She found a job, a small apartment, but the guilt still lingered. She thought about Miss Thompson, about the life she had taken. She thought about the choices she had made, the person she had become. Sarah had thought she could outsmart everyone, but now she realized the truth. She had only outsmarted herself. Sarah sought forgiveness, but it was hard to come by. Miss Thompson's family had moved on, but the pain of her loss still lingered. Sarah wrote letters, expressing her remorse, but she knew she could never truly make amends. Still, she tried. It was all she could do. Sarah's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked anger and desperation. Schools used her story to teach students about the consequences of their actions, about the importance of seeking help when they felt cornered. Sarah's legacy was a painful one, but it served as a warning to others. As Sarah grew older, she found herself reflecting on her life more and more. She thought about the choices she had made, the person she had become. She thought about Miss Thompson, about the pain she had caused. And she thought about herself, about the lessons she had learned. Sarah had thought she could get away with it, but now she knew there was no escape. Sarah's story came to an end, but the impact of her actions lived on. Self-sabotage, life's ruin, no escape. Sarah's trapped.